Imagine having to walk 13,000 kilometers through deserts that could kill you in 2 days, through mountain ranges with no names on any map, through territories controlled by armed bandits, just to deliver a piece of cloth. Sounds insane, right? But that is exactly what happened. For over 1,500 years. The Silk Road. The name sounds beautiful, romantic even. But the reality was far more brutal, far more complex, and far more important than anything you have ever been told. This is not just a story about trading fabric. This is the story of how the world first became connected, and how that connection changed everything: religion, disease, technology, food, even the way humans think. Let us get into it. First, there is a fact that most people get completely wrong. The Silk Road was not a single road. The name is misleading. There was no one straight highway from China to Rome. What existed was a massive network of interconnected routes.
Some overland, some by sea.
Like an enormous spider web stretching from the eastern tip of Asia all the way to the shores of the Mediterranean. And here's something even more surprising. The name Silk Road was not even invented until 1877 by a German geographer named Ferdinand von Richthofen. So for 1,500 years while this route was operating, nobody called it the Silk Road. They just knew. This is the road to wealth. So when did it all begin? Most historians point to the era of the Han Dynasty in China, around 130 BC. Emperor Hanwu, one of the most ambitious rulers in Chinese history, sent a diplomat named Zhang Qian westward. His mission? Find military allies against their arch-enemies, the Xiongnu tribes. Zhang Qian was gone for 13 years. He was captured, held prisoner, escaped, continued his journey, and eventually made it back to China. His diplomatic mission? A complete failure. He never found any useful allies. But he brought back something far more valuable: information. He reported to Emperor Wu about wealthy kingdoms in the west.
Persia,
Mesopotamia, even Rome. Kingdoms that China had never heard of before. And the most shocking detail? They all wanted one thing from China:
silk.
In Rome, silk was considered more valuable than gold. Roman emperors wore it as the ultimate status symbol. It became so popular that the Roman Senate actually banned men from wearing silk. Not because it was too expensive, but because they considered it too feminine and morally corrupting. Of course, nobody listened. And from that moment, the wheels of trade began to turn. The Silk Road. The name makes it sound like only one thing was being traded. But in reality, this route was the greatest supermarket in human history. Before supermarkets were even invented, from China flowed outward silk, porcelain, paper, gunpowder, and tea. From Central Asia came legendary warhorses. The Chinese called them heavenly horses. Because of their size and power, they were far superior to anything bred locally in China. From India came cotton, spices, ivory, and gemstones. From Persia and the Middle East came glassware, jewelry, and new plants that transformed agriculture across Asia. From Rome and the Mediterranean came gold, silver, wine, and wool. But here is one fact that genuinely shocks most people. China kept the secret of making silk hidden for nearly 3,000 years. They knew silk was the most powerful economic weapon they had. The penalty for smuggling silkworm eggs or larvae out of China:
death. Think about that.
Not smuggling weapons. Not drugs. Tiny little worm-like creatures that produce thread. And the punishment was execution. This monopoly finally cracked around 550 AD, when two monks, almost certainly spies working for the Byzantine Empire, successfully smuggled silkworm eggs out of China, hidden inside hollow bamboo walking sticks. After that, silk production began spreading to Persia and Europe. One of the most successful acts of industrial espionage in the history of the world. But here is what truly makes the Silk Road extraordinary. The most influential things it carried were not goods at all. They were ideas. Hitching a ride on the backs of camels. Religion was one of the biggest passengers. Buddhism was born in India around the 5th century BC. Without the Silk Road, it would most likely have remained a regional religion. confined to the Indian subcontinent. But thanks to the merchants and monks who walked these routes, Buddhism spread into Central Asia, then China, then Korea, and eventually Japan. Today, roughly 500 million people practice Buddhism, most of them not in India, but in East and Southeast Asia. It all began with a long walk along the Silk Road. Islam spread in a similar way, primarily through maritime Silk Road routes in the 7th and 8th centuries AD. Arab Muslim merchants carried not only goods, but their new faith to the coasts of India, Southeast Asia, and the eastern shores of Africa. Technology changed hands too. Paper, invented in China, slowly spread westward along these routes. Try to imagine civilization without paper. No books, no legal documents, no letters, no scriptures that could be distributed at scale. Paper transformed how humanity stored and shared knowledge, and the Silk Road was the vehicle that carried it. The same goes for the concept of zero and the Arabic numeral system, which actually originated in India. It traveled into the Islamic world, then into Europe,
Through these same trade routes.
Without zero, modern mathematics is impossible. Computers are impossible. You are watching this video right now, partly because of a number discovered thousands of kilometers away, carried across continents on an ancient trade road. And then there was one passenger that was far more deadly than any of them. The Silk Road did not only carry wealth and knowledge, it also carried plague. The year is 1346. A trading city on the edge of the Black Sea called Kaffa, now known as Feodosia in Ukraine, is under siege by Mongol forces. But the Mongol soldiers are not falling from enemy swords. They're falling from a mysterious disease, one that turns their bodies black and causes grotesque swelling. In what may have been one of the first acts of biological warfare in recorded history, the Mongol commander ordered the infected corpses to be loaded into catapults and hurled over the city walls. The European merchants trapped inside panicked and fled by ship, not realizing they were carrying the plague with them. Those ships docked in Sicily in October 1347, and from there, the Black Death began sweeping across Europe. Within 5 years, between 30 and 60% of Europe's entire population was dead. In some cities, the death toll reached 80%. Streets were filled with bodies. Churches ran out of land to bury people. Entire villages simply ceased to exist. The Black Death, caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, carried by fleas living on rats, traveled along trade routes. From Central Asia, through the Silk Road network, into the Middle East, then into Europe. The bitter irony? The very network built to connect civilizations and spread prosperity became the pipeline for the greatest human catastrophe in recorded history. But the world that emerged from the Black Death was completely transformed. The massive labor shortage forced landlords to pay higher wages to the peasants who survived. European feudalism began to collapse. A middle class began to grow. Some historians argue that the Black Death, as horrific as it was, actually accelerated the arrival of the Renaissance and the birth of the modern world. So, what finally ended the Silk Road? Not war, not a natural disaster, but a single feat of navigation that changed everything. When Vasco da Gama successfully found a direct sea route from Europe to India in 1498, rounding the southern tip of Africa past the Cape of Good Hope, the thousands of kilometers of overland roads suddenly became irrelevant. Overnight, why endure scorching deserts, mountain blizzards, armed bandits, and the bureaucratic demands of 100 different kingdoms, when you could just load cargo onto a ship and sail directly to your destination? Sea trade was faster,
Cheaper.
and could carry vastly more volume. Within a generation or two, the great cities along the Silk Road, once bustling and wealthy beyond imagination, went quiet. Samarkand, Bokhara, Kashgar, names that once sounded like legend, slowly faded into ordinary towns. But the legacy never truly disappeared. The Malay and Indonesian languages contain hundreds of loanwords from Arabic, Persian, Sanskrit, and Portuguese, all carried by these trade routes. The food you eat today From spiced dishes to noodles rooted in Chinese culinary tradition, is a direct inheritance from thousands of years of cultural exchange along this road. And today, China is attempting to build something eerily similar. They call it the Belt and Road Initiative, a multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure project stretching from Asia to Africa and Europe. Even the name, One Belt, One Road, explicitly references the ancient Silk Road. History, it turns out, never really ends. It just changes its clothes. So what can we actually learn from the Silk Road?
First,
Connection is both dangerous and beautiful. The same road that carried silk and porcelain also carried plague and war. Being open to the world always comes with risk. But isolation brings a slower, more certain kind of destruction.
second,
Trade is one of the most transformative forces in human history. Not because merchants were noble or altruistic. Most of them were just chasing profit. But as a side effect of that pursuit, religion spread, technologies changed hands, and the world became smaller and more interdependent with every passing generation. And third, we are all the product of encounters that happened on that dusty road. Every time you eat food seasoned with spice, read a book, or use the number 0 in any piece of math, you are feeling the ripple effect of a trade route that is 2,000 years old. History is not only about great men and epic battles. Sometimes, the history that most changes the world begins with an ordinary merchant, a single camel, and a bundle of silk hidden beneath a cloth. The Silk Road has been gone for centuries, but its fingerprints are still on you. In your language, in your food, in the numbers you use, and in the way you see the world. If you enjoyed this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. In the next video, we will cover one event in history whose consequences are still shaping the world today, but almost never gets taught in school.
see you then.